to the Small Beans Services Program, Directorpiece Theater. Without further ado, our two hosts. Thank you.
Hello, and welcome to the inaugural episode of Directorpiece Theater. I am one of your co-hosts, Adam Ganser, and with me is my friend and fellow co-host,
Abe Epperson. It's me, it's Abe.
It's you. It's you.
Hi, everybody.
Now, this is a podcast in which you and I, in our respective roles as directors, which we've done professionally a little bit, and also which we've done, frankly, in an amateur way, even before that, for years and years, get to talk and wax poetic about the kinds of movies that both we love and we know you guys love, but that aren't necessarily the award-winning films. And we get to talk about the art and craftsmanship of those films. Abe, aren't we excited about doing this?
yeah, absolutely.
It was too formal. It was too formal already.
I think this film, what's at the heart of this podcast, is that we want to take a look at movies that are beloved and see what makes them tick.
Yeah.
And make it kind of an argument for, like, I don't know, it depends on the argument. Today we have a pretty good one that
we do.
We're going to be talking about, like, middle of the road pictures.
Yeah.
Ones that you do love but aren't, like, considered awards. Award winning. That's absolutely true. But it's something that it's kind of like, I'm going to come from the point of view where I'm like, that's kind of a shame. Yeah. It's not always going to be that type of episode, but we both have MFAs in film and television.
We do.
That we got at USC, which is where we met.
We did.
We are almost always, we're usually in agreement about this, come from the angle that, like, films are like closed systems, and you kind of start off with a basic premise or conceit that you're looking for, and then the craftsmanship ought to pay homage to that impetus.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think is near and dear to the heart of this podcast. So if you want
sure.
to learn more about what makes films tick from an atomic level, this might be for you. Absolutely.
Also, this is an attempt for Abe and I to find yet another way for us to imitate the thing we did for 6 years as employees of the website, which shall not be named, where Abe and I would go to a meeting, and then afterwards we'd go outside and smoke cigarettes under a tree and argue about whether or not our favorite movies were in fact artistic achievements. And this is our attempt to drag you, the audience, beneath the cigarette tree. So come with us. Bring a pack of Camel Crushes if you'd like. And we'll talk a little bit about movies.
Memories.
Why was it Camel Crushes? I don't know what got me hooked on Camel Crushes.
By the way, just so everyone knows, in this relationship, I was the guy always bumming cigarettes off of you.
You used to, like, use your fingers like pinchers and just like, cigarette, please. A cigarette, please.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay, Abe, so what are we going to talk about today?
Well, today's argument is fairly simple. I love the movie Punch Drunk Love, and I think it's a masterclass in craftsmanship. That's not really what this podcast is specifically about, but it is also about it. What it's really about is recently I rewatched the film Wedding Singer, and it occurred to me that there's some basic similarities, and there's a pretty cool game that both movies play with.
Yeah.
And I think they both accomplish, like, really well. They're both love stories where the lovers start to open up to each other's ability to, like, be themselves.
Yeah.
They empower themselves to love themselves and ultimately each other.
Profound.
There's this kind of, like, am I okay to be me? And then the other person says, like, absolutely, I love
you as you are. Yeah.
And then that gives them confidence to, like, all right, then I'm going to be me. And then by the end of it, they're, like, themselves, like, singularly together.
So just to clarify, are you equating Punch Drunk Love and Wedding Singer as equal artistic journeys? Are you saying they are both artistic films and that they have this? They're in effect sort of mirror image films.
I'd like to phrase it like this: like, if I were to ask you about what is a film that was made about 20 years ago, stars Adam Sandler, is a dark romantic comedy, and exhibits a very controlled color palette, one of the more memorable aspects of which is Sandler's blue suit. What film would that make you think of?
It would definitely be Punch Drunk Love, for sure.
And both of those things all of those things I listed are true of
Holy
both films.
shit.
Yeah.
I'm loving this already.
So here's my argument.
Okay, I'm ready.
That the craft that they play with by representing that thing that I was just talking about is to represent each character with a color palette that kind of influences or seeps into the other character's color palette as they fall in love, ultimately leaving the characters both with their original identity or like color intact, but with flourishes and accents of each other's color. It's just like basic metaphor stuff with color palettes. Does that make sense?
It does. So just to make sure, so you're saying that in each movie, the Adam Sandler character starts with like a basic color palette, and then his love interest over time also takes on that color palette?
And likewise with like Julia in the case of Wedding Singer, and in the case of Punch Drunk Love with Emily Watson.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it's just that's the basic game.
Okay.
And so that game, I'm going to prove why that game's true in a second. But the question I want you to kind of is near and dear to our discussion is both films, if you agree that both films really do this well, it makes me wonder what really determines how society sees like artifice or like art films.
Yeah, why is Punch Drunk Love an art film and Wedding Singer is a comedy?
Wedding Singer's just another romantic comedy. Exactly.
Ooh. Okay.
Okay.
Love that.
So one is directed by Frank Coraci, I believe is his name, and the other is Paul Thomas Anderson. So those are the two guys that we're talking about at the helm.
Yeah, you can't, by the way, pronounce his name any other way. So if you guys are going to correct him from home, you are wrong. Just tell you that right now.
So before I have Adam come in and shit on my idea or answer my question flat out in like 0 seconds flat, I want to give you a few examples of proof. Let's start with Punch Drunk Love, which is 2002.
Yeah. After Wedding Singer. That's after The Wedding Singer.
After The Wedding
4 years after The Wedding Singer. Enough time to copy Coraci.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Coraci.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the first frame of that movie is Barry is immediately connected with Blue. If you remember, he's like in a his like office. It's weird because we never see it again, but it's just like a storage facility where he makes phone calls. It's a single desk. There's like a bright blue band of blue.
Yeah.
And gray behind him.
Yes.
And he wears his blue suit, which is like the bluest thing you've ever seen. And they keep that going throughout the film. It's the only suit he ever wears. So he is thoroughly, no problems there.
It's also really saturated. Like it's such a saturated blue. Yeah. In a way that like it really punches you in your eye holes for sure.
Yeah. And within that first sequence, like within the first like 3 or 4 scenes, Lena, who's played by Emily Watson, she makes her first appearance, and she's usually like rose or peach colors. She also blends into darker reds, but that's how we introduce her. So we already immediately have this kind of blue versus like warm, like cold versus warm kind of thing.
Right.
There's a shot that happens with their first flirtatious conversation where she comes in and he's got the harpsichord on his desk after like saving it from the street. And she comes in and she was like, they have this awkward, like, if you remember, it's got the John Bryan like score where it's just like crazy intense, where it's just got drums, and you can barely focus. And so it doesn't feel like a flirtatious sequence because that's what Paul Thomas Anderson's doing. But she kind of comes in and she basically just asks, like, I'd like to see you like outside of this space. Can we go on a date? And he's like, doesn't know what to do with that. So he goes like, okay. And the whole time she's wearing like a purple base. At the first date, she wears red, he wears blue. But if you notice after the first date, before and as they start, then time kind of does a jump throughout the movie. There's kind of a few days later that they don't really go into details about. But you start to notice that his tie, even though he's wearing the blue, his tie starts to turn from like yellow, like crazy weird colors. He's got like marigold at one point. He's got a blue tie there, wears a lot.
Right.
But then he's starting to wear like reds, and like we start to see warm colors influence his ties. That there's such a small index that it's hard to say. It may not. That may be looking into things.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's what's kind of happening.
Sure.
And then we cut to Hawaii, and they start to fall in love.
Right.
And this is where Emily starts to see, because he makes the grand gesture, Emily starts converting to blues over Hawaii. In fact, Hawaii is shot in blue, but it's like a beautiful blue instead of like a sad blue, like their night scene.
It's not morose.
Like yeah, like the water is blue when they make their kiss. It's in silhouette, and the outside is like beautiful blue colors.
Just briefly, can I briefly interject and just ask?
Yeah.
So is wardrobe the only way that we're seeing this color palette, or is it in the scene as well in this movie?
I'd say Hawaii has it's mostly wardrobe, but they do. Like, for example, there's a shot as they're leaving Hawaii where they're like pretty clearly in love.
Yeah.
Where like the plane behind them is red and stuff like that. But the movie isn't as bright and painted as Wedding Singer or like another movie like a Wes Anderson film.
Right. You don't notice it in the same way. Yeah. I recall. Yeah.
So it's more of like intentional little flourishes of color.
Okay.
So that's one thing that's distinctive about Punch Drunk Love.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of.
I would argue that's actually. I would argue that's a point in the favor of your argument too. If there's not a lot of color, and then the color that he uses, especially in wardrobe, is like really saturated, that's like screaming at the audience, "Pay attention to this."
Yeah.
Right. Artistically.
And
okay.
Yeah. So at the end, they kind of influenced each other's colors.
Yeah.
And that's my argument for that. I think it's a well done game.
Sure.
That film went on to, at the Cannes Festival, got Best Director for P.T. Anderson, got nominated for the Palme d'Or.
Yeah.
All right, let's get to The Wedding Singer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to remind everybody, though, just in case the Palme d'Or really impresses, go back and look at that list of Palme d'Or movies, because they're certainly they're all achievements in one way or the other, but you definitely don't look at them and go, those are always the best movies. You definitely don't. Just FYI. Go back and check that out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying. Just saying. Wild at Heart won the Palme d'Or one year. You know what I mean? That was not the best film that year. I guarantee you that. Anyway,
to each their own. Honestly, I think awards are bullshit, but that's because I have
that's really where this is leading, isn't it? This is leading to awards are bullshit. Of course.
Yeah, I'm. Oh man, I'm a real I can't help myself. I have to be just contrarian as fuck. That's just who I am.
It's usually about the third cigarette when you would say that to me. It was about cigarette 3 when that would come out.
What is wrong with me, Adam? What is wrong with me? All right, The Wedding Singer is in 1998. It sets up literally the same game. Wedding Singer is the color system where Robbie, the character that Adam Sandler plays, is blue, and Julia, who's played by Drew Barrymore, is rose or purple.
Yes.
It also shows Robbie at his lowest in deep crimson, which is a new addition to the game.
Yeah.
That's a new addition to the game, but I think they do a good job of separating, like, you're going to go, but Abe, this is Adam, by the way.
That's me.
Crimson and, like, peach, they're both, like, warm colors. I think crimson, if you look at the film, crimson, it's, like, an oppressive, like, we're talking vampire, like, you open it up and a coffin and there's like red fucking felt.
It looks like blood. Honestly,
that's the kind of crimson we're talking about.
Yeah. It looks like blood.
Versus hers, which is like more rosy. There's a lot of like, I don't know. It's more romantic colors. I'm not good at colors, but it's like rose and stuff like that. So I count them as different colors. That's just me. It could also throw a wrench into my grand theory here. But point is, as their love develops, their color space shares each other. Same game. Robbie starts moving blue. The lights, his band, his version of self is like connected with teal and with blue. But then almost immediately in that movie, he is left at the altar by his fiancée,
Linda.
And he is just in a world of red at that point.
Yeah.
The moment that he goes off and is like, I got to take a moment, there's actually some beautifully well done framing where like the rest of the world is in like one color, but he's in like a crimson shirt and he has like crimson blinds behind him.
Yeah.
Or like downstairs in his like where he sleeps in the basement, like all of the reds surround him. He's like literally in a prison of red. It's actually really, really well done. I want to make a I want to make a video on it because it's like underrated how good they specifically said, all right, this color has to be around him in every fucking frame.
Having just rewatched this movie for this podcast, because I had not watched The Wedding Singer since like I was in high school, so almost 20 years ago, and having just rewatched it, I was like, wow. There is a lot of really well composed and really intentionally colored shots here. Like the one
Yeah,
you mentioned
yeah.
of the red blinds is like, if you've ever made a single movie in your life, you're like, whoa, this is a thing they're doing in this movie. Like, this is not an accidental decision. The crimson here is very intentional.
Right, and it doesn't. And I think the line that's really interesting to play is that when you watch it as if you turn off all the film critic stuff and all
Right.
of the MFA, you just watch it.
Go back in time.
It doesn't take you out of it.
No, it doesn't.
Like, it doesn't
No.
make you go like, oh, that's crazy, even though it just looks like a well-composed shot and you notice it and you feel it, but it doesn't go like, that's obviously doing something. No. Some people with that critical eye are always going to make that argument because they're always looking for it. So you're going to get someone on the internet saying that.
But as a filmmaker,
ultimately, I think it works.
I agree because nobody has ever commented on this before. In all the times that I've been involved in a conversation about Wedding Singer, which is more than zero, like that's never been brought up. And also, like, because again, and I say this not even because of the MFA, but because like I've turned on a camera and tried to create an image in my life. Like, it's so clear that this was a choice.
Yeah,
it's really clearly a choice, and I think that's important for anybody who doesn't remember this but wants to go back and watch it after this podcast. Ask yourself, could this have happened by accident? No chance. Mm-hmm. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah. In the interest of speeding along, when we cut to Julia and her first scenes, she is in a situation where she is about to get married, but her husband's like an asshole, cheats on her and stuff like that, which you yet to know.
With the last name
but
Gulia.
in her life, from her perspective, everything's rosy and cheery, and her world represents that. All the colors are pinks and peaches and rose. And then when we cut back to Robbie, there's a prolonged segment where he is immersed in red. The first wedding that he sings at, he's all blue. The second wedding, he's now wearing a red suit. The theme of the wedding is like that crimson red.
Yeah, it's really
Cindy and
crazy.
Scott.
It's like vampire wedding. Yeah.
And that's where that's the first time they actually meet.
Right.
Because she's a wedding like planner. That's the first time they meet. And like the outside is red. He's in a dumpster, and the dumpster is red. And I've never seen a red dumpster, so it's all very meticulous.
Yeah.
But then there's like one or two scenes where she like perks him up a bit, and then the third wedding is. It's a bar mitzvah.
It's a bar mitzvah.
It's not a wedding. It's a bar mitzvah. And the world is kind of blue. He's still red.
It's not kind of blue. It's rom.com blue. Like it's
rom.com
like
blue.
It's really blue.
Yeah, it's like everything is shades of blue.
Yeah.
But he's the one red influence. And there's some band members that have red, so it makes it not look weird. But like that to me is clearly the filmmaker going, okay, yeah, the world is blue. He's seeing it outside here, but he still is very, very angry. He's like hating women. He thinks he's never going to make it. He's got self-esteem issues.
Yeah.
He's still very much in that headspace, even though Julia did, in their first interactions, kind of give him this feeling of hope. And then as they continue to do that, it gets more flirtatious. You know, you guys all know rom-coms. And so they decide to have like a few honest like conversations. Julie's going to plan a wedding. He's going to like help out.
He also returns her blue jacket to her at sort of a key moment early in this film. Anyway.
Yeah. And he, at this point, his blues start to lighten up.
Yeah. He goes back to blue a little bit.
This is like in the middle of the film. It's what I'm calling like the getting to know Julia phase.
Yeah.
And it's really, there's an amazing sequence at one point, which is there's a song that says, it's Someone Kill Me Please, that song. Because it's like a nice, sweet song, and like the joke is that he's like, you think it's about like, you kind of, he says it's about his ex-fiancée.
Right.
And it's all like clearly the first verse was written when he was in love with her.
Yeah.
But then the chorus is like,
Somebody
then
kill
you
me.
like ripped out my heart.
Yeah,
Somebody kill me, please. And the way that the film does it is that the world is kind of fairly blue and rose, and we're seeing all the elements of like the things that Julia's bringing into the mix.
And then him.
But then right as he hits that chord that says, someone kill me, you know, like we pop to a wide shot where like, you see his guitar, and his guitar is crimson.
He's also in a red light. There's a red light in his hair and stuff, too.
And there's
I just
red light
watched
in
this.
his hair,
Yeah.
but it's not as noticeable. There's like the bottom half of frame is all red.
Yeah.
So it's like this kind of moment that says, he is starting to kind of hopefully see, and like there are times if you crop it right, he's a happy guy.
Yeah.
But then he keeps coming back to this and he just can't get her out of it.
I'm sorry, I have to interject at
of-
this point. I hope you don't mind, because that's exactly the scene where John Lovitz shows up. And
Yes, it is.
John Lovitz has only ever been John Lovitz in his entire career, and that's like one of my favorite John Lovitz cameos because he's such a little snail. He's just amazing in it, and like he has that stupid line where he's like, and I benefit, and then he closes the drapes in that stupid way. Yeah, exactly.
He's just the creepiest guy.
Yeah.
I love John.
Me
Lovitz.
too. I love him just for being him. Like, go for it, Lovitz.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, and I am the benefit. It's so dumb.
Yeah. The fucking critic.
Yeah.
There's this strange scene which is it's a really bizarre scene, and it's one of those scenes that you go back in romantic comedies of the 90s and you go like, what the fuck were we doing?
Right. Why
There's
was
a
this?
scene
Yeah.
where Julia's sister and Julie are having an argument about how, like, what's a hot kiss? Like, what's the right
Oh,
kiss
that's not
for a
that's not her
wedding kiss?
sister. That's like her friend from work.
Oh, it's her
Yeah, yeah,
friend?
yeah.
I thought it was her sister
Yeah,
for some reason.
And then she's
Yeah.
like, "Why don't you guys kiss each other to test out the church kiss?"
Yeah.
Yeah, why
'cause they
would that
wanna
happen?
determine
Yeah.
if it should be open mouth or not.
Right.
And it's like, what?
Why would that be the thing? Why would that be a solution?
Test?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, I guess it's a friend kind of reading in that like she's into this guy, but it's like not the right time.
they would
friend.
never do that. That couldn't
Yeah.
happen. I totally agree.
And
It was impossible.
And that's the scene where both characters share a look that kind of says to each other like, "Oh my, was that real?
Yeah.
Like, are we for
Yeah,
real?
yeah, yeah.
Like, is this more than just like idle flirting? Is this like, are we a thing?"
That's the
And
scene
it's
where
gonna
you're
be a
like,
problem.
That's the scene where you're like, oh, now I remember why Drew Barrymore was like in
Yeah.
all the late '90s rom-coms, because she's so adorable, and also
Mm-hmm.
there's like a little earnestness when it comes time for the actual kiss to happen,
Yeah.
where she's a real person every time, and it's really great,
And this is where I think my argument like fucking strangleholds.
Oh,
Because if you look at that fucking scene,
okay.
Robbie's shirt is a blue shirt.
Fucking blue. Yeah.
It's blue.
Yeah.
It's like a light blue.
Yeah.
And it's got this pattern of little like teardroppy thingies that are rose in it. And when you look at her shirt, it's a rose shirt with blue accents. So it's just like, all right.
It's like
it's
suck a
mixing.
dick, artist.
It's all
This is a
fucking
thing.
brewing up, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we have like the kind of end of Act 2, beginning Act 3 kind of situation where we she's beginning to accept her feelings for Robbie. It's a tumultuous time in the movie. Robbie realizes he's in love with Julia, but he knows that she's going to get married and he's not going to do anything about that. So he feels that like she might be the one, but I think it's over for me. Like I think it's kind of like he's getting to his all's lost point, and she's going to have the realization that her husband's a jackass. And
Right.
it's the buildup of that. So it kind of business as usual in terms of that. There's no real movement in their relationship, therefore no movement in my theory. Until I guess the Crimson returns at the all's lost point.
Well,
because
I see, and I want to make sure there's a one key moment that I want to come back to when we actually discuss this theory as a debate that I want to bring up as a counterpoint. But so far, everything you've said, that's exactly my experience of the film. What you said exactly how I saw it when I watched it just now.
Yeah. I just want to cut just so we can get to that bread and butter, which is what I'm looking for.
Me too.
The very last sequence.
Yeah, on the plane.
When he comes into the plane and he sings her the song, "I Want to Grow Old with You."
Yeah.
They're talking.
Yeah.
In between them is a very clearly created seat in an airplane seat that is very purple. And it's just like,
that's right.
You gotta think that was, because
Yeah.
you've never seen a purple one. They're
Yeah.
always fucking beige.
Also, I think he's in I think first class's seats are all like really red, and she's in a chair that's like really blue, and he goes over to where she is.
yeah,
when he
she's
sings
wearing
the
like
song.
yeah,
Right?
she's wearing like a light red,
Yeah.
and all the chairs are blue, and
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
purple like back of the seat.
Yeah.
And it's
I
just
recall
like,
this.
ah.
Yeah.
And just so everyone knows, it's also gotten some awards. The Wedding Singer was nominated by MTV for the MTV Awards for Best On-Screen Duo. It was nominated. It didn't win.
MTV always like cutting edge, like leading the pack.
Cutting edge.
Forerunning in thought. Yeah.
So in the end, it's about control of the spaces.
Right.
Both films do it not just because it looks good, but because it has like a relevance to the plot and a thematic purpose, right?
Right.
And that's kind of artistic, right? That's things that we would expect like good films to do.
That's literally what filmmaking is in terms of artistry. Like that is the art of filmmaking.
Symbolism, metaphor, all these things, like taking deeper motifs that we usually reserve for higher craft, quote unquote, higher craft films.
We admire them in higher craft films, right?
When I'm arguing that the actual case is that there's fantastic craftspeople in the prime of their artistry work on all types of films, and they're just not exclusive to the films considered for awards, and it's a goddamn shame.
Yeah.
And we need to point it out and say, good job, Wedding Singer. You fucking nailed it.
Yeah.
And Punch Drunk Love, also good job, but like sometimes we give you all the credit for shit like this.
Yeah, when's it turn for Karachi to win his award, right? Why can't Karachi win one just because he went back to the 80s?
How come Wardrobe's not getting... How come they're not fucking getting things?
You know what's funny that you say that?
Told...
The Wardrobe is actually really good in The Wedding Singer. Like, it's not...
Oh, it's on point,
It's really
dude.
good, and it's also, like, not overdone. Like, it's not stupid.
No.
You know?
That's what's crazy, is that it was so subtle and so good.
Yeah.
My art... Like... You watch it and you go like, this all makes sense. This is a regular film. And then you go, oh no, wait. It's actually meticulously crafted, and that is impressive because it's so subtle you don't notice it, which makes them, totally ignored.
And also,
because you don't go like, do you guys watch Wedding Singer? Oh, that film with all the great costumes? Get out of town. I love that film.
The film with the narrative arc as portrayed by varying color palettes.
The sewing work,
Whoa,
the color
the
palette
subtlety.
choices.
Yeah.
Oh, come on.
I totally agree. Can I just make a couple of brief observations about Wedding Singer before we get into the meat of this? Do you mind?
Hit me.
Okay,
Hit
the
me.
Boy George jokes are baffling now. Like when you're watching him in 2019, you're watching like everyone's reaction and thinking like, why are they so weirded out by this guy? And that's when you remember, oh, it was just a joke to have a person dressed in drag back then.
Yeah,
like it's like that, which is weird because Boy George was a thing back then. It was just so like it was so 90s because it was so like there's a weird person, laugh at him. And it was
that's exactly.
There was
it's
never
like,
a different
in
joke.
My house, it's like they're Rodney Dangerfielding their way out of like every fucking room, and it's just like, all right.
There was never a different
what
joke
culture was back
at
then.
all. They didn't even try.
It was lowest common denominator, like low hanging fruit kind of shit.
It's funny that you say that because then again, here's a filmmaker who's like trying to do a color opus out of this thing. So like on the one hand, you have these like lowbrow jokes of like, the shitty limo driver who is a womanizer and also dressed as like Michael Jackson because somebody has to, and Boy George and haha, look at the person in drag. And then you have this guy like intentionally painting blinds to like communicate the deep inner sadness of Adam Sandler's character, Robbie Hart.
Right.
So I don't know.
Right.
I don't know. Is Karachi ahead of himself or not?
It's fucking wild.
Also, can I briefly comment? Like the guy who was Johnny Two Times in Goodfellas is like it is in this movie, and there's no reason for him to be in this movie at all. Like he is just in the movie because he was in Goodfellas. He doesn't contribute anything to this at all.
Yeah, he's there just to be a bud, I guess.
But he's like married to Adam Sandler's sister-in-law or something, or sister.
Yeah,
and it's like it's really hard to understand how that marriage took place. Or just why he's there. It doesn't add up at all.
That's a fair point.
Yeah.
He is not, and he's needed for a buddy to commiserate and make, to allow in that all is lost moment in the bar.
Yeah.
Where Adam Sandler's saying like, she's the one, and she's getting away, man. For him to make the realization and for it to click. But I know her fiance is a fucking piece of shit. I owe it to myself. I owe it to her to not allow them to get married. And I'm in love with her. I'm gonna go do the thing.
I really liked the shitty
so that's why
fiance. Yeah. I really liked the shitty fiance as a bad guy in this movie because for about 2/3 of the movie, he's kind of just he's not playing a dick. He's just being a guy who's kind of in the way, and like just his personality irritates you in a way that's like, I'm not sure the actor is actually doing this on purpose. You know, like it's really really well done.
It's all...
And also, just this is my last observation before we get into the actual content you were saying. Billy Idol just murders in this movie. He crushes this movie so hard. And like now, like 20 years later, I'm like, dude, Billy Idol was just fucking game for this. Like he was in on every scene and he was trying very hard. And like, more power to you, Billy Idol. Like, thank you for being the best in this movie, right? Glenn doesn't deserve her. He's just murdering it, you know?
Yeah, he murders it. There's a lot of people, and obviously this is the film that is remembered for rapping grandmas. I get it.
Right.
I get it.
Well, I mean, obviously, Adam Sandler's thing is like getting people, like getting wacky side characters who have like one or two lines to overdo it. Like that, he loves that shit, right? Like even like Rob Schneider's whole career after SNL is basically The Waterboy. Like that cameo in The Waterboy, plus a couple movies he got after that.
Ever notice how Adam Sandler's his golden era of films, the asshole in the movie is always exactly the same? Like, what's the give me one difference other than like the vocation and the like actor who played them, between like the asshole in this movie and Shooter McGavin.
There is no difference. Shooter McGavin
they're fucking the same.
No, he's exactly the same. Only Shooter McGavin is far and away my favorite villain in any Adam Sandler movie because he's so well done, and just his arguments with fucking the James Bond villain. You know what I mean? The guy who died, who's like the giant guy.
The Jaws?
Yeah,
guy?
Jaws. His arguments with Jaws, it was just
yeah.
magnificent. I love him every time I think about it. It makes me so happy.
Yeah. He's it's something. There's something about it. I think the difference between like, because that's just a like more attuned to like the Caddyshack and just like just a guy, just like a bunch of slubs, like schlubbing around doing jokes, versus this one, which is like actually it's an Adam Sandler thing, but it's also at the same time trying to be like a genuine like romantic comedy. The only difference is that to me, obviously he's less of a man-child, Adam Sandler, but the villain is relentlessly evil as opposed to Shooter McGavin, who's like pathetic,
but also like an arrogant jackass.
Exactly.
That's his problem.
But we make fun of him like he's a piece of shit. You pieces of shit for breakfast, kind of line.
Yes.
Like it's fun to take the wind out of his sails. We don't really do that with our guy in.
Not with Glenn.
He's just
Glenn.
No, Glenn is just seriously a problem. He's just a problem.
And he's in the way. Start. I mean, that's really it. Is he's in the way.
Yeah. And he's like, I have sex with women outside of like whatever. It's fine.
You want me to kick your ass? Like, where are we going with this? Yeah,
fucking whatever.
Exactly.
I bet you're gay. It's that kind of stuff.
Right, exactly.
And it's just like, go fuck yourself.
In fact, I believe he actually asks that question at some point when he has like two women, his arm around two women, which is ridiculous. I wanted to mention this one other thing that I think will transition nicely into this Punch Drunk Love versus Wedding Singer conversation. And that is, so when I was watching Wedding Singer for this, what struck me more than anything else about the movie is that Adam Sandler is really weird when he tries to be romantic. Like it's like he feels very it doesn't feel natural to him. It feels like awkward, and he turns into this weird, like sort of whispering little boy. That's his romance guy, and it's very, like, now watching it, you're like, ugh, it makes me, like, cringe. And that is, I think, in part why we remember Punch Drunk Love so fondly, is that Punch Drunk Love kind of understands that there's an inherent sort of sociopathic thing about Adam Sandler, and it really brings it forward. Like,
absolutely.
And I think that's fundamentally why we remember the movie, because otherwise it kind of is just a weird rom-com. It's not. I mean, it's got a weird tone to it, and that's unique to P.T. Anderson, but it's basically a rom-com.
It's got zany, wacky characters.
Yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman crushes in that movie for jokes. Oh, he's amazing.
Just
a
bunch of way too grand gestures of love happen in the movie. At the exact same movies that typically have, like, if you take a stopwatch and you look at the script. It's just like how to, lose a guy in 10 days or whatever.
Yeah.
Can't hardly wait. Like these are like memorable rom-coms, right? I'm not even talking about the shitty ones that like fail at being rom-coms.
And if you gave exactly Adam Sandler's situation and job to is it Frank Karachi? To
Karachi.
director Karachi, I'm pretty sure it would be a pretty slapsticky situation. You know what I mean? Because like his job is ridiculous, his like world is ridiculous. How is it? It's really just sort of rendered in this more sort of semi-serious way by P.T. Anderson, and I guess we sort of accept him on face value. I guess we sort of take it on face value, like, oh, I guess this is a serious movie because it's being presented to me as a serious movie in a way.
Yeah, that's one of the things I wanted to get into.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the thing when it comes. Karachi is doing this like really interesting thing over here.
Yeah.
That is like no one talks about. And like it's not anymore. It's in fact, as I was pointing out with like the inclusion of like crimson and other colors, it's even more complex from a color standpoint. That doesn't win you points. It's not like, he's got 4 colors, not 3.
So he's
I'm not
better.
talking about that kind of shit. I'm just talking about like it's a well-devised system. Yeah. It's got some form of complexity to it, but it's no more or less complex than like a Punch Drunk Love.
No, I would argue Punch Drunk
P.T.
Love
Anderson
is a little bit more. It's really sort of a more aggressive color decision because it's not. Mm-hmm. It doesn't blend in. Like P.T. Anderson's decisions there are a lot more like you have to look at this and notice it because it's loud.
Right. And kind of one small caveat just before, go to town or whatever.
Sure.
I'm not crazy. I understand why Punch Drunk Love is a better movie.
Of course, me too.
Like it's a better movie.
Right.
It's got better jokes in it. It's more human. There's just so many elements that like make the story matter that make it better. But like, what are awards? Are awards about what the audience think is the best movie?
Right.
What was the experience? Is that what we're giving an award to? Or is it that we're giving an award to people who are doing like when we put in people, like when we give awards for like the Golden Glove or like the MVP
in sports,
we look at people and how like, yes, their influence mattered and what they did matter, but it's also about the stats, and like we ignore the stats all the time.
Right. I think you're right that we sort of only accept quote unquote stats from a certain category of movies. Right, so I think that would be the equivalent. That'd be the equivalent in sports of saying like Mike Trout can't be the MVP in baseball because the Angels aren't a serious contender. Only a playoff team can really have an MVP on it. And it's like, well, that's not.
And that's kind of bullshit.
Yeah, it's not true. You know what I mean? Like, and if you don't like that analogy, use literally any analogy in another sport. It's the same thing, right? Like, there's an element of. There's an element of
tiers,
and metrics, right? Whereas with Academy Award movies, essentially, you cannot make The Wedding Singer and win an Academy Award, no matter how good of a job you do at it. You can't, right? Like, there's no version of history, even alt history, where Wedding Singer gets nominated for best production design or best wardrobe, even though it was really good. Like that would never happen because of what kind of movie it is.
And I fucking hate awards, but like I will be the first to admit that they fucking matter. They fucking matter because
they economically matter.
People
for sure.
are hired next year based around them. Like, so it's influencing people's jobs, people's livelihoods, and like so you can just become an obscure, production designer or whatever because you never met someone like P.T. Anderson.
Right, and
that's bullshit. Even if you're good at your job, you should be paid, you should get work.
And I imagine that, and I'm not sure about this, but I imagine, like, it's so much easier for me to imagine a world where somebody who's a production designer or who's like even a DP would work on content of all different genres and not be as typecast by like, oh, did you work on The Wedding Singer? Sorry, you can only work on, feature comedies. Right. You can't work on, the next P.T. Anderson film. Like, I don't think that is as true of that art as it is of directors. Or certainly writers, you know what I mean? Like, and so it's weird to me that their work can only be acknowledged if they work on this certain slate of movies. I know why that slate of movies gets the awards. It's because it drives people to the theater and because it validates a certain sense of artistic achievement that Hollywood wants to have. And I get that, and I'm not, I have my disagreements about it, but it's strange to me that work that isn't just like sort of tone work, but like actual artistry can't find any way to be celebrated unless it's in the right slate of movies. You know? That's your point. I agree with you about it. But I want to make some counterpoints. You ready?
Yeah,
okay.
Hit me with your best shot.
Thank you, because that's exactly the song I wanted to hear in this movie and didn't. So as a person who's tried to make several web series that were color palette controlled, as you know, what I was surprised about Wedding Singer was how loose they were with the color palette. Here's what I mean. The very last scene on the plane, Adam Sandler's wearing sort of a black and white jacket that's like very like it's almost like groom, but the opposite of a groom. And she is not wearing any of the colors that you'd expect, given how much control that they've been trying to exert. She's not wearing any of those colors either, and neither is Glenn. So none of the three people that are in this like sort of color controversy thing are wearing those colors in the last scene. They're sort of relegated to the background, and that was weird. The other weird thing about it was, and because I was watching it for this purpose, is that when Adam Sandler has his sort of like Dark Night of the Soul moment, which is when he's like laying on the ground and Linda sort of shows up again and like is like, hey, you're drunk and on the ground and you just had a fight with Julia or whatever, and hey, I'm back. He is soaked in blue light. That whole area is soaked in blue light. And it was one of those times where I was like, wait, so did we break the metaphor here? Because we're clearly pouring blue light all over him, and yet it means something different than what it meant all throughout the movie before that. And did you notice that, or am I taking crazy pills?
No, yeah, they're loose with it.
Yeah,
I think that's fine.
I knew you'd say that, right? I don't have a problem with that either, because I would also argue
if you do it
that P.C. Anderson is pretty loose with his color palettes, including the one that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And speaking as a person who's tried to lay down really rigid rules about how to control color, you know what happens? It distracts the audience. So I kind of get why.
Yes, because then it's relentless, like, oh, fucking another blue suit.
Right. I don't understand. Why is everything blue? Thank you, internet commenter.
It's because you just got to make a memorable moment for it, and you got to do it enough that it becomes like an identity.
Yeah.
But like even people who like I really identify as like a Democrat, it's like I don't try to make my every angle I talk about everything
has a donkey in it. Yeah,
this pasta is really good. It's like the Democrat of pastas. Like I don't do shit like that. I don't like make politics my everything. And likewise, I don't think this craft doesn't own and needs to take hold of the movie. It's just in play.
Well, and I think
constantly.
And I would argue that we're so used to sort of like the hyper controlled versions of this that we're seeing in like, all those sort of action movies of the 2000s where there was only blue and yellow at all, or the Wes Anderson thing, right, where the color palette and the frame are so rigid and controlled that we think that's the only way that this art form is expressed. And it's like, no, in a comedy movie when like, nobody cares except for the director who, bless his heart, is like trying to make an artistic statement with this stupid 80s throwback movie. No, he doesn't need only red and blue to be in the movie. It's fine if he has a couple of greens and yellows. And that was like a fun realization for me. It was like, oh, this is sort of a more loose way to do this. And I think I enjoy it more because of that. It makes it more coded,
Yeah, and when it's there, you do notice it.
Oh, absolutely. Again, like the most telling...
It's just enough to think about looking for it.
Yes.
And then when you look for it, it's like little Easter egg hunt. You don't want them, you want to kind of search for it a little bit, right?
And the most telling frame, again, because I know some of you are going to go back and watch this just to see, the frame that's the most telling is the one where you're looking at the three men at the table right after Adam Sandler's been broken up with, and the two men are, I want to say one of them's his brother-in-law and the other one's his buddy who drives the limo, and then there's Adam Sandler. Those two guys are in like sort of teals, and the background behind them is teal.
It's like a seafoam green. Yeah.
And then he is sitting in crimson, and the blinds are painted crimson, and it's like, that would not happen in a house. You know what I mean? So
you wouldn't have one
there's
blind,
no way.
One color.
Right, exactly.
No.
So it's definitely like, they're definitely making artistic choices, and that's the one that really makes it a loud choice, I would say.
Yeah, that one's the loudest in the movie because everything else feels like it makes sense. Like,
right.
what's in his garage, or I mean, what's in his basement? Well, he has like maybe a stop sign or like a red sign, or like the background has a red painting or something like that. That can happen.
Yeah.
This like literally doesn't happen.
I also, at a certain point in watching the movie, I started to think that the director was also doing something with saturation, because I know every time that the frame was really saturated, like instead of those like sort of faded pastel colors that you saw a lot of, every time you saw saturation, the intensity of the scene was pretty high for the most part.
Yeah, exactly. I think he was doing something with like comfort versus agitation or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like anxiety just as a thing, because like he gets stronger colors when he's a little bit more anxious. She is kind of, I mean, it's just another romantic comedies probably.
Right.
And she's also Drew Barrymore isn't the comedian of the film. She's a little left. There's something left wanting.
She is not
in
fully
her arc.
developed. Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
That's it is what it is.
She was weirdly neglected artistically in the movie on a lot of fronts. Like, that's one of them. The other one is her hairstyle makes like almost no sense to me as both an 80s throwback and like looking at it, it's like, oh, they didn't do that great of a job with this, with her hair specifically. And I say that.
Yeah, because he's wearing like the perm.
Right, his hair
like
really
that.
mattered, and hers was very like, they kind of cut it and then didn't style it that well. So it kind of looked bad. And it was like, is that on purpose? Because I don't know why.
I think it's,
you know,
I think it comes from the fact of like SNL movies and like SNL it's not an SNL movie, but like he came from SNL and like he is the star, like Will Ferrell's the star of Anchorman. You kind of put all the character design work into Adam Sandler because he's like on the poster and like the.
Oh, so's Drew Barrymore. I mean, like.
Yeah,
you know.
she is, but like, why are you going to? They thought of it when they conceived of the movie is the reason this is going to do well is because like Adam
Right.
Sandler's hot at the box office,
And
right
that's
now.
true.
So they put more work into his.
I mean,
Design.
I would be very sad if that was the answer. But the reason I think you're right is the other thing that's very troubling about this movie is when you look at the way that the cover box / poster artwork is put together, none of that color palette stuff comes through at all. And it's like, well, this director clearly did this. Why didn't you guys market it around the thing that he did? You know,
it would
like,
be kind of
that's-
delightful. It's visually pleasing.
Right, everybody'd feel like, oh, this is a style of a thing. Instead, it's sort of this sloppy, totally other color palette thing, and you're like, what? Like, I don't understand, you know, it doesn't make any sense. And so you're kind of bummed out. It feels very sort of thrown together. And it makes me wonder if, like, The Wedding Singer, if it had been given a little bit more care from its, like, sort of producing partners, whether it might be a really strong movie. Like, it really could be, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right about that. You're right about that.
Yeah. I mean, so, of course, and I don't mean to be hyperbolic, that's why it wasn't considered for Academy Awards. You know?
Well, yeah.
I mean,
I said
right.
that. Like, it's
Right.
like it's not as good of a movie as Punch Drunk
Not even
Love
close.
for
Yeah.
reasons that I typically go to movies, which is to have like ultimately to have an like visceral experience and saying like, damn, this thing fucking slaps. This
this thing fucking slaps. You say
this
that?
thing slaps. It like,
Oh my
yeah,
God! Now that's the only thing I'm ever gonna let you say. Holy shit! This thing fucking
It's like,
slaps. Whoa! I love this. My God! Print it.
All right, just because it's me,
I love that you
it.
say that.
I'm a
This thing
character.
fucking
I'm a
slaps.
character. It's
Oh
fine.
my God! You made my night right now.
It's Punch Drunk Love is it's trying to say something deeper about humanity,
Definitely.
and about loneliness. Now, Wedding Singer literally occupying the same space, talking about loneliness and how you get out of like kind of the grief of relationships. Or the grief of not being in a relationship.
I mean, I think it's also
it has a very cookie cutter kind of. They don't talk about it for a lot of scenes, and then at the end, it's just like, "I want to grow old with you," and we go, "Oh, that's a really sweet sentiment. What a good little sum up to that movie." Whereas Punch Drunk Love is like a Rolodex of scenes of saying like, "So you know that part of the grief? Well, like let's look about that and like what does that mean about you and stuff like that." Like his scenes with his sisters
are deep
and stuff that
and crazy and great.
stuff that I omitted in terms of, because it doesn't have to deal with the color palette of the two main lovers, but is still very much like, there's a whole thing about how the reason they chose his blue suit, and we touched on this in the Punch Drunk Love frame rate. Like, it's actually a superhero movie. He is Superman.
Right.
And
yes, I remember when we were talking. Yeah.
Yeah, it's stuff like that. Like, he's doing a bunch of other stuff, which makes it a better movie. But so I'm not going to say that Karachi should be on the list, the short list for the Palme d'Or, but I am saying that, like, we should consider the costume designer, though.
Yeah, I think
You know?
what you're saying is, like, because of the kind of movie it is, all these other people who did great work will never get acknowledged except for on this one podcast that ideally they're liking and subscribing, because that would really help us out.
Yeah.
You know? No, and I think you're right. I mean, as a person who's, led teams, like led production teams, as have you, like, I think we both understand, and it's important for the audience to understand, like, hey man, every good thing anybody's ever done in front of a camera or behind a camera was done in a collaboration, and some of the collaborators on Wedding Singer were trying real hard, and that's really cool. Because that movie didn't need to be cared about as much as it was. I think you did really well by bringing up P.T. Anderson, because it elevates the sort of comparison point for Wedding Singer. But Wedding Singer's actual contemporaries, or like sort of the lineage that it comes from, is stuff like Stripes and like Blues and like Blues
Yeah,
Brothers,
sure.
and also like its successors are like Judd Apatow movies. And honestly, find me another film in that sort of broad genre that's trying as much.
Well, I just want to let you know that in 1998,
Here we go.
there was a few other rom-coms made,
Right.
including There's Something About Mary, You've Got Mail, How Stella
I'm
Got
so
Her
glad
Groove
you brought up
Back.
You've Got Mail, because I just watched that. I don't know why I'm on this kick,
I'm just
I am.
blasting right past that, not even acknowledging
No, you need to. You need to, because
can't hardly wait.
Tom Hanks is vastly superior to Adam Sandler's a love interest. I'm putting it on record. Anyway, keep going.
Not another line about You Got Mail, or I'm going to put you in the penalty box, okay? I don't need to talk about You Got Mail
shit.
right now. It's not that I hate the film.
I kind of do need to talk
fine.
about it, but go ahead.
But 1998, Shakespeare in Love also is a rom-com,
Technically,
isn't it?
sure.
Technically, it's not it's not a conventional rom-com. It's a romance story. But like, so when we're talking about its direct peers literally being made in the same year, like, you're telling me There's Something About Mary, or You Got Mail, or How Stella Got Her Groove Back can shine a light to the craftsmanship in The Wedding Singer? Get the fuck out of town.
I know that. I know You've Got Mail can't. That I know. I haven't seen How Stella Got her groove back in a long, long time. But yes,
There's Something About Mary
it's also
it's
fine.
literally the same setup.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
It's the same. It's like Ben Stiller's hot right now. Let's put cum jokes.
Right.
Like that's what that is. That's what Wedding Singer was supposed to be. And then this guy had a humble vision, saying, "Let's do something with a little bit of color."
Yeah.
And that's a spicy
Yeah.
meatball. That's what I'm saying.
Adam Sandler's the best at finding a funny old person too. He's very good at that. All right. Well, I think you've made a pretty good case here. I think you've made a good case for supporting the crew members and their artistic endeavors, if not the career of director Frank Karachi.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I can't wait to see Karachi's The Master Redux. I can't wait to see that. Ooh.
I gotta look into this guy's films.
Yeah, I
want to
know what else he
color
did.
work he's
I
been
literally
up
have
to.
no idea if he did anything else. I didn't even look into it.
I love if this was the only episode of this show, because this is not going to be the only episode. But if it was, it would just make it seem like Abe really likes like colors.
Yeah, Abe's
for
a
some
real
weird
into
reason.
colors guy.
He's like, why aren't they giving awards to colors?
Give best color. Can we get a best color?
Where are the color awards?
Yeah,
I'm not a maniac. I just found a thing that I thought was delightful, and I'm telling you about it. Fictional audience who's yelling at me for putting my opinion on the line.
For the audience, for future episodes, we've been discussing movies like Ocean's 11, Die Hard, and a bunch of your other favorites as sort of artistic fodder for us to discuss as filmmakers. And hopefully you guys will join us for those episodes as well. If you liked it, feel free to like it. Feel free to share it with your friends, and hopefully there'll be more for Directorpiece Theater, right?
Yeah, and I think the next episode is going to be an Adam episode.
Who knows what that means?
The tables will turn, and I'll be the yuck who's trying to...
I've been your yuck.
Infiltrate your bullshit.
Yeah.
And then and we'll see who wins. I mean, this one I pretty much, not that this is the setup for the podcast.
Here we go.
There's no winners and losers other than like the joy in our hearts. That's the real winner. But like
you won.
I won, right? Like,
yeah, you really slapped today, Abe. You really did.
Yeah, I did.
All right, adios.
Hey, baby.
Adios, everybody.
Thank you for listening.